And I'm delighted that we can welcome Mark Cronin as the Iacocca Institute Executive Dialogue Speaker for today, September 25th. Mark comes to Iacocca after a career in aviation that he mentioned earlier, service as a pilot in the United States Air Force, and decades at American Airlines. He was at American Airlines for 32 years, including positions as a line pilot on 727, 757, 767, S80, I'm not sure what that is, 737, A330, and A320. And very significantly, he served the airline as well as in management as its chief pilot, director of flight, and managing director of line operations. I met Mark as the spouse of one of my favorite colleagues, Professor Chris Ann Cronin, who taught public health here at Muhlenberg College, where I teach and where Scott was a student a long time ago. But I have a lifelong interest in aviation, as I mentioned earlier, or last presentation. My grandfather was one of the founders of the International Civil Aviation Organization. I've invited Mark to my business classes several times. He's been a terrific speaker, and in those classes, Mark revealed what his post-retirement mission is, and that leads to today's presentation, which is to address what he's been seeing as persistent labor market entry problems throughout the aviation industries. And he has founded, and he's going to describe something called the Velocity R Aviation Foundation. And I just put the website into your chat. Mark has invited me to be an advisor to Velocity R, which I'm happy to do. And every few days, I get an avalanche of emails from one of the other advisors or board members or pilots that's reaching a significant stage in their career. And it's very cheerful to see the community of people in flying support each other. So it seemed natural to introduce Mark to Scott, which led to the invitation to join the fellows and to today's presentation. So Mark, take it away. I have your slides here and ready to go.
Well, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, everybody. I received a phone call or text message a few weeks ago saying that Roland had a cancellation, so I'm a fill-in. And after hearing all those airplanes that I flew, you'd think I was technologically advanced. However, Zoom gives me troubles, and Roland's going to move the slides for me. But to reintroduce some of the things that Roland had talked about, I spent considerable amount of time in the aviation industry, but it really goes back. I was a graduate of the University of New Hampshire. And when I went to the four-year program there, my freshman year, I was kind of bouncing around between geology, forestry, business. I just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And one day I just happened to be walking back from class. I was walking, I remember it vividly. I was walking over a little bridge that goes over a train track that we had there. And this Air Force fighter jet flew over. And there was an air base right near us at the college. And I looked up and I had my aha moment. I just looked at that and I said, I don't know exactly what that is or how to do it, but that's what I want to do. And so this discussion that I'm going to have today is sort of driving that aha moment for others that don't really have that opportunity. So if you could go to the next slide, Roland. You'll notice that I titled it The Other Side of the Fence. And this picture for me just encapsulates in a metaphor of what we're trying to do here. And you have obviously the airplane, you have the young child looking at the airplane, and you have the fence between them. And metaphorically, that fence is the barriers to getting that child to be interested in aviation careers and hopefully becoming a member of that industry. In order to do that, and I do apologize, it looks like the font here came up incorrectly, but we're going to take a look at the challenges that are facing the industry right now, and they're serious. There is a wave of retirements, there's expansion, and that is creating some serious workforce challenges for the industry and some of the ways that we're trying to address it. In order to do that, I'm going to do a quick industry overview. We'll talk about the impact the industry has both globally and the US. And during the presentation, you'll notice that I bounce back and forth between a global discussion and a US discussion because the US aviation market is so critical to the global market, and I'll explain why that is. We'll look at some of the current workforce forecasts from the organizations that put them out, and I'll narrow it down a little bit to show you what the concern is and how they're going to try and address it. Then we'll look at some training capacity analysis, basically the throughput, and that's where the US really plays a major role in that we we have the majority of capability to train in these roles. And the roles are very expansive. So, but I'll try to limit it to three that you would understand and come into contact mostly with. We'll talk about some of the barriers that are leading to these challenges, and then some of the solutions. And at the very end, I'll give you a quick snapshot of some of the work I'm doing locally. And I say locally, but I'm part of an industry in and of itself, which are nonprofits that are working hard to address some of these issues. So next slide, please. Globally, you can see, and in the title of this slide, I say US aviation is an engine for our economy. I could easily take out US and our economy and state aviation is an engine for all economies. And just listening to some of the introductions I saw here, I can tell that there's quite a few people that utilize the aviation industry in their industries, just going back and forth, travel, whatever the case may be. This is an important part. And so if you look at the global aviation impact, it's about $4 trillion, or about 4% of the worldwide global economic activity. And we create approximately 87 million jobs. Now that's broken out, direct, indirect, catalytic, basically the effects it has outside the industry. Direct would be airlines, airports, that sort of thing, manufacturers. Indirect would be tourism, travel, fueling, logistics. So you can see the impact it has. On the US side, it's about $1.5 trillion, or about 5.6 or 5 to 6% of the national economy, and about 10 million jobs, which, as you can see right there, that's roughly 1 in every 14 American workers are associated with the aviation industry. A quick number here, it's 30 to 35% of aviation manufacturing within the United States, and that could be as high as 50% depending on where down the line you start to include. Next slide, please. So annually, there's organizations that put out forecasts. There is Boeing, there's CAE, there is IATA, which is an associate organization to what Roland had mentioned, ICAO, which is more the UN oversight rulemaking body, and also Airbus. I mean, obviously. I'm going to limit the discussion of those forecasts to just the Boeing and the CAE reports, because those are pretty much top of the line. That's everybody waits for those two reports each year. And as you can see right here, you just take commercial pilots. Just in North America, 123,000 are needed over the next 20 years. Globally, it's almost, it's just over 250,000. And that excludes the business jet requirements, which I'm sure many of you seen as the wealth moves up, people get into private aircraft, and they have their own structures that they have to fulfill, and it's their own governance, and they need qualified people as well. On the aviation maintenance technician side, 416,000 are needed globally, 710,000 by 2045. They're already talking about a shortfall by 2028 of 20% and a 31,000 shortfall by 2031. And when I talk about the wave that's coming, 85% of the current aviation maintenance technicians will leave the industry. They'll leave the career in the next 10 years. So this is why the industry is facing a critical shortage of qualified individuals. Now, on the air traffic controller side, there's both global and domestic numbers here, and it's a bit of an outlier because this is the one area where some countries will, in fact, do their own training. They have language issues, they have their own within state rulings and procedures. But even then, you're looking at a 7,000 position shortfall, 71,000 needed by 2034. And that's predominantly due to both retirement and growth. And in the United States, as with pilots and air traffic controllers, there are mandatory retirement ages. Right now, for the pilots, it's 65. There is a push to see if they can raise that to 67. And in the US, I believe it's 56. That's a mandatory retirement. So, according to the FAA, we have a shortfall right now of 3,500 air traffic controllers. And you'll see periodically in the news how this is impacting the daily operations. I mean, you just think, and I'll just take American Airlines by itself. We have 3,000 departures a day. And you can, between our, you take Delta, United, and American, those are pretty much the three largest airlines in the world, which why it makes the US so critical to this whole piece here. Next slide, please. So, oops. So we have current training and education capacity. And the reason I say this slide is, which in essence makes the US so critical, is because the US has the majority of this training. 15 to 20% of all global training occurs here in the United States. There are 218 college universities that have aviation programs, but 100 to 130 of those are here in the United States. So we have the technology, we have the capacity, we have the room, and we are the largest aviation market. So it's very typical for other countries to send their potential pilots, aviation maintenance technicians, and even air traffic controllers to the United States for that training. And the reason they do that is because our certifications are highly respected, and they are transferable with bilateral agreements anywhere in the world. So that's why when we talk about this industry as a whole globally, you simply can't bifurcate the US out from that discussion, because we are so critical to the world in not only training but manufacturing. And as I indicated here, you can see that we do have both pilot and aviation management programs built into the system. We're adding more. The aviation maintenance technicians, we're producing about 6,000 to 7,000 aviation maintenance technicians a year. And the air traffic controllers, again, that's a bit of a wild card, because while we are training them, other countries do, in fact, do their own training at some level. So that one is not quite as dependent upon the US as our pilot and management. And when you look at the training, and you can see the retirements, the mandatory retirements, the expansion, the growth of this industry, it's right around the corner. You look at this training, education, the throughput, if you will, there's a delay, a very large delay. For an example, on the pilot side, it's 3 to 4 years of training before you are able to obtain the minimum requirements to be able to fly for the airlines. For the aviation maintenance technicians, it's a little less. It's about 23 months, unless you come from the military, which is about 2 to 3 years. And then you also have on-the-job training, which would require about 3 years. So you can see there's a delay here. Even the air traffic controllers, the school's shorter, about 3 to 5 months, but it's about a year and a half to 3 years of on-the-job training before you're fully qualified. So there's a substantial delay. You can train them, but before they are qualified to actually work in the industry, there's a pretty considerable delay. And to give you an idea, like the aviation maintenance technician training, we train in the United States about 40% of the worldwide aviation maintenance technicians. So you can see how critical the US and our infrastructure is to the global aviation industry. Next slide, please. Some of the key barriers to aviation careers. Now, this is where we talk more specifically in the US market, but again, I want to emphasize how important this US market is to the global aviation industry because we have uh, we have the capacity and the ability. And within the US, we've noticed that there's a very large awareness gap. I always use the phrase teachers and counselors and even students at some level, they don't know what they don't know. And we see this amongst the schools in the area that they just don't have an understanding of what careers are available, nor do they have an understanding of having the ability to set up the goalposts and the guideposts to help the students move in that direction. There's a sense of perceived barriers. An example would be it's about $80 to $150,000 to train a pilot. And there are people that are going to look, I just can't do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I don't even put that on my future plans. There's an exclusivity to it. And that'll get into, back to that picture. It's like, I'm not there. I don't have somebody in my family that was in aviation. I don't know somebody who was there. Therefore, it's really not an option to me. We're not very good, even though we have such an immense manufacturing and airline presence in the United States, we don't have good relationships between industry, airports, and schools. And that's a vitally important part here. And if you go back to that picture at the beginning, that fence is not only a metaphor, it's a reality. People drive past the airports every day. They don't know what goes on inside the fence. They're not allowed to know what goes inside the fence. And so that's part and parcel with our work to try and alleviate that, and get these people to understand what is available out there. The guidance programming, schools tend to go with what they know. In other words, what's easy, healthcare, business, IT. Those are examples that just about every city has those. Not every city has a local airport. There's some areas that they don't have an airport at all, which goes down to the geographical restrictions. There's no association to them. The complex pathways, the fragmentation of the information, it's awful. And that's part of what we are trying to do from the nonprofit side. Representational issues. There is a complete lack of diversity. We're talking single digits of, for diverse backgrounds, women, people of color, whatever it may be. It's not very high. And so it's up to us to make sure that we get into these communities, find out ways in which we can help them understand what's available to them and bring them into this fold. And then also there's financial means. And this was a particularly sore spot with me because when you look at the cost of four-year schools, even two-year programs, pilot programs where they learn to fly, it all comes down to the almighty dollar. And what I did is I went and took a look at scholarships, aviation, specifically aviation related. And the amount of information that was out there was very hard to find, very hard to get people to respond to me. The information was lacking, and I can easily see how that is a barrier to somebody that they're not even going to try. And so that goes to some of the things that we've tried to do on the nonprofit side is to break down all these barriers that you see up here. And I'll show you in the next slide some of the things that we're doing. So this actually is a picture from one of my first events I did at Philadelphia Airport. with a group called Squash Smarts. And this is a very unique organization within the city of Philadelphia that utilizes the sport of squash to bring students in at the high school level and sort of mentor them. And so we connected with them, brought them to the airport to show them what was possible. And that comes down into the industry partnerships. I come from American Airlines. I know the managers there, so I'm able to set something up with that. But we don't, it doesn't, it's not ubiquitous throughout the industry. It is very fragmented. If you have the connections, great. If you don't, it's just not going to happen. So this is why it's falling to a lot of the nonprofits to make these connections. And this is a perfect example. There would be no connection between American Airlines and this organization at this particular airport unless I stepped up and did it as part of a nonprofit program. Now it expands out from that. Once you, as my son-in-law Thomas said, I am the great connector. I connect groups, get it started, and then it flourishes. Another piece is the educator resources. I've reached out to numerous schools around me, and I'll give you an example. I live here in the Lehigh Valley. We live 1 hour west of the world's largest city, an hour north of Philly. We have 10 high schools, 10 school districts, 19 high schools, 6 colleges, 2 community colleges, 2 VOTECs, and about 55,000 students, fourth largest airport in the Lehigh in Pennsylvania. And if I brought all the students together and asked them, tell me everything you know about aviation, I don't think I'd get a lot of hands raised. And that's awful. So I've made it a point to reach out to these schools, talk with the educators, explain what happens, and then connect them to the airports. And we've done multiple visits to the airport, and it's very common for the educators, the administrators, the counselors to look at me and go, I didn't know this existed. Additionally, something as simple as I took 30 students from the VOTEC that were in the automotive program and took them to an aviation maintenance facility saying, you can work on Nissans and Toyotas, or you can work on Boeings and Airbuses. That's your choice. So that's been a very successful program, and you'll see it in the last slide. But the other piece is the financial literacy, is getting this scholarship information out to them. We produce at my foundation a database of every aviation scholarship I can find. And I put it in an Excel spreadsheet and I announce it to the world that it's free to download. Everything is free. And it helps them understand that they're not alone in this endeavor, this goal of bringing them into the industry. And it shows them that there are financial resources out there that they may not be aware of. Additionally, we've seen some basic initiatives on mobile experience. In other words, there may be communities that don't have these resources, moving mobile resources to them to help them understand. It's very new. It's still in its infancy, but it is growing there. A diverse representation, mentorship programs. This picture is a perfect example. And I say this part emphatically. It is vitally important for these kids to see people working in these positions that look like them. I cannot emphasize that in any way. They need to see that because that makes a huge difference. And to get programs that support them, get that knowledge base out there so that they understand. For instance, there is an organization of Black aerospace professionals. There is the Latin Pilots Association. There's the Women in Aviation International. There are groups out there that can help them, but you've got to make that connection. You've got to get that information out there. And this is a huge information load. It's a big piece of this program of what we do. And of course, finally, there's policy support. And I'll give you a perfect example. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, we finally got the Department of Education to approve codes that allow these school districts to make aviation curriculum part of their curriculum. So, for instance, we are the Bethlehem VOTEC Next year, we'll start the very first aviation maintenance technician program. And they'll use curriculum that is provided by nonprofits that will allow the students to complete much of their coursework and then matriculate to local two-year programs and universities. And that cuts down on their cost because they're able to do it through the public school system. And that's where public policy comes in helping them understand ways in which that eliminates some of the barriers that they might have, some of the concern. Next slide, please. So to encapsulate it, I've given you some examples of what I have done in my nonprofit, and I am in this community of other nonprofits that are doing similar stuff. The trouble is it's very fragmented, it's very regional, and we're working very hard to make these connections in a more global sense, if you will. And we've done that by connecting the schools. That middle picture right there is a group, a principal and his staff went to the Lehigh Valley International Airport to do a tour. And they got a very unique picture. I've been in the industry for 40 years and I've never had a picture like that, where we stopped on a runway and got to take a picture. And they consistently come away with, we didn't even know this existed. And now they can take that back to their schools with public policy implementing training programs, breaking down the barriers of financial need, and getting these kids so that they have the chance to have their aha moment at a point in time where they can make a decision and move and enter this industry, which sorely, sorely needs them. And that's the work that we've been trying to do. And I totally appreciate the time you've given me to, obviously, I'm fairly passionate about this because, like you, I utilize this industry and I want to see it be robust. Thank you.